Me and my younger brother have been doing trips like this since we were kids. Our dad used to take us camping every summer, and somewhere along the way, it became just something the two of us did together as adults. Every year, we would pick somewhere new, different state, different terrain, different type of wilderness. It was our thing, and we both looked forward to it more than just about anything else on the calendar. This particular trip was to a remote area in northern Idaho. We had rented a small cabin through a private listing online, not Airbnb or anything like that, just a handwritten website with photos and a phone number. The kind of listing that gives you slightly less confidence the further you get from civilization and the more you realize nobody knows exactly where you are. But we had done enough of these trips to know that the less polished listings usually meant the more authentic experience, and we were not wrong about that. The cabin was small, 2 rooms and a bathroom, wooden walls that had been there long enough to turn gray, a wood stove in the main room that took up more space than seemed reasonable, a porch overlooking a slope of dense pine forest that went down into a valley below. No neighbors visible in any direction. No road noise. The kind of silence that takes a few hours to stop feeling strange and start feeling like exactly what you came for. We arrived on a Friday afternoon and spent the rest of the day doing almost nothing. Sat on the porch, made food on the camp stove we had brought, watched the light change on the trees until it got dark. Went to bed early because we had a long hike planned for the next morning. The hike took most of Saturday. We were out for about 7 hours covering a trail that went up a ridge and came back around through the valley. Hard going on the way up, but worth it for the view from the top. By the time we got back to the cabin, both of us were done. Completely emptied out, in the good way that only a long day of hard physical effort produces. My brother went straight to the bathroom to clean up. I dropped my pack by the door and collapsed onto the couch and lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the woods outside. That was when I noticed it. The cabin smelled different than it had when we left that morning. Not bad exactly, just different. Like someone had been moving around in a space that had been sitting still all day. The particular quality of disturbed air in an enclosed room. I lay there trying to identify what I was actually noticing, and after a minute I sat up and looked around. Everything appeared exactly as we had left it. Packs by the door, food bag on the kitchen counter, both our sleeping bags still bundled on the beds. Nothing visibly out of place. I told myself I was imagining things. We'd been outside all day in pine forest, and coming back into a closed wooden cabin would obviously smell different to me after that. Simple explanation. I lay back down. My brother came out of the bathroom a few minutes later and sat down at the small table to eat something. We talked about the hike, argued mildly about which section had been the hardest. Normal conversation. I started to relax. Then my brother stopped talking mid-sentence. I looked over at him, and he was completely still, fork halfway to his mouth, eyes fixed on the window above the kitchen sink. "What?" I said. He set the fork down very carefully. "Do not react," he said quietly. "There is someone standing at the edge of the tree line looking at the cabin." I did not turn around immediately. I asked him if he was sure. He said yes, and that the person had been standing there for at least 30 seconds without moving. I turned slowly and looked toward the window. The tree line was maybe 80 feet from the back of the cabin. In the fading evening light, I could just make out the shape of a person standing at the edge of the trees. Not moving, not walking away. Just standing there facing the cabin directly. We watched for almost a minute. The figure did not move. My brother said quietly that we should check the doors. I went to the back door first. Locked. Front door, locked. Both windows on the main room, latched. When I came back to the kitchen, the figure was gone. Just the tree line, no movement. Neither of us said much for the next hour. We locked everything again before bed, and I propped a chair under the back door handle because the lock on it felt loose. My brother did not comment on this. He had already put his hunting knife on the nightstand beside his bed. I woke up at around 3 a.m. to a sound outside. Something moving slowly along the outside wall of the cabin. Deliberate footsteps in the gravel and pine needles that ran along the foundation, moving from the back of the cabin toward the front. I lay completely still and listened. The footsteps stopped somewhere near the front corner. Then there was silence for a long time. Then the door handle moved. Just once. Slowly. Testing. The chair I had propped under it held. After another long silence, the footsteps moved away from the door and back into the woods. And eventually, I could not hear them anymore. In the morning, we found boot prints in the soft ground directly outside the back door. Fresh ones. Large. The tread pattern of work boots, not hiking boots. We drove out that same morning without finishing the trip. Reported it to the county sheriff's office on our way back to the highway. The deputy took our information and said there had been 2 similar reports from that area in the past month. Different cabins. Different dates. Same description of a figure watching from the tree line. He did not tell us what they thought the person wanted. I did not ask. My father passed away 2 years before this trip. Lung cancer. Fast moving. He was gone within 4 months of the diagnosis, which did not leave much time for any of us to adjust to the idea of losing him before we actually lost him. Grief like that has a way of leaving unfinished business in your head. Questions you never got to ask. Conversations that did not happen. Pieces of a person's life you realize you knew nothing about only after the person is gone. My father had grown up in a small town in rural Tennessee. He left in his early 20s and never went back as far as I knew. Rarely mentioned it. There was a cabin on the outskirts of what had been that town that he had built himself as a young man. After he died, I found the deed to it among his papers. I did not know it existed until then. I decided to go see it. I am not entirely sure what I was looking for. Some connection, maybe? Some piece of who he was before he became the person I knew. The town itself had been dead for decades. The property records showed no utilities, no road maintenance, nothing. Just a piece of land with a small structure on it that my father had built and apparently never returned to. I drove down in early October, parked in what had been the town center, and hiked the 2 miles back to the property through woods that had been reclaiming the land for the better part of 40 years. The trail was barely visible in places, more of a memory of a trail than an actual one. The cabin was still standing, which surprised me. Small, maybe 20 feet by 15. Log construction with a flat roof that had partially collapsed on one side. The door was not locked because there was no lock, just a wooden latch on the inside. I went in and spent a couple of hours cleaning out what I could and assessing what would need to be done to keep the structure sound. It was enough to occupy my hands, if not quite my mind. By the time the light started going, I had done what I reasonably could for the first day and settled in for the night. I did not sleep well. Kept waking up with that specific feeling of wrongness that is hard to name precisely, not fear exactly. more like the persistent sense that something nearby was not as it should be. I attributed it to the unfamiliar environment and the weight of what the place represented to me, and tried to rest as best I could. In the morning, I took a walk to clear my head and found a rise in the terrain about a quarter mile from the cabin where you could see back over the tree line toward the old town. From up there, I could see the outlines of the abandoned buildings along the main road, and in one of them, just barely visible at that distance, there was a light in a window. I watched it for about a minute before it went off. I told myself it was urban explorers or teenagers or someone with as much innocent reason to be there as I had. I went back to the cabin and spent the day working. That night, I was sitting by the wood stove when someone knocked on the door. I did not move for a moment. The knock was deliberate. 3 solid raps on the wood, then silence. I asked who was there. A man's voice came back, slow and measured. He said he was an old friend of the man who had built the cabin. Said he had seen the smoke from the stove and thought he would come by to see him. He used my father's name. I stood up from my chair. The sound of someone knowing my father's name in this place where my father had not been in decades hit me somewhere unexpected. Part of me wanted immediately to open the door and talk to this person, to ask what he knew about my father, what the town had been like, why my father had left and never come back. I walked to the door and stood on my side of it and asked how he knew my father. The man said they had grown up together, that they had been friends as young men, that he still lived out here and had always hoped my father would come back someday. Something stopped me from lifting the latch. I am not sure I can explain exactly what it was. Something in the quality of his voice, a flatness to it that did not match what he was describing. Emotion that should have been there and was not. I told him my father had died. There was a pause. Then he said he was sorry to hear it. Then almost immediately, he asked me to open the door. Said it was cold. Said it would be good to talk about my father together. I stepped back from the door. He asked again, then knocked again. Harder this time. His voice changed when I did not respond. The measured quality dropped away. He told me to open the door, then said things about my father that were designed to make me feel guilty for not opening it. Then stopped talking altogether and just knocked steadily for what felt like a very long time. Then he stopped. I heard his footsteps moving away from the cabin, through the dead leaves, back toward the trees, back toward whatever he had come from. I sat with my back against the wall beside the door for the rest of the night, with my knife in my hand, and did not sleep. In the morning, I packed everything and left without looking back. I still do not know who he was or how he knew my father's name. I have thought about it many times since, about why my father never spoke about that town or went back, about what he might have left behind there. Whatever it was, I think he had good reasons for leaving it where it was. And I think I was right not to open that door. I want to be upfront about something before I get into this. I am not someone who gets easily spooked. I grew up in a rural area. I have spent plenty of time alone in the woods. I have camped solo more times than I can count, and I have never had any experience that genuinely frightened me until this one. So, when I say that what happened at my cousin's cabin last summer still affects me, I want you to understand that is not something I say lightly. My cousin owns a property in the mountains of western North Carolina, about 40 acres of wooded land with a cabin near the center of it. He had been offering to let me use it for years, and I had always meant to take him up on it. This past August, I finally did. Drove up on a Friday afternoon planning to stay through Sunday. Just a quiet weekend alone in the mountains. No agenda, no obligations. 3 days of silence and forest, and nothing in particular to do. I got there around 4 p.m. The cabin was at the end of a long, unpaved driveway that cut through dense hardwood forest. When I pulled in and started unloading my car, I had that immediate feeling of being somewhere genuinely remote. The nearest neighbor was miles away, according to my cousin. The nearest town was 40 minutes down the mountain. I was on my second trip between the car and the cabin when I saw him. He was standing at the edge of the tree line on the north side of the property, maybe 100 yards away, just standing there in the shadow of the trees watching me. Not moving, not doing anything, just watching. I stopped and looked back at him. We stood there, looking at each other for a moment. And then I went back to unloading the car because I did not know what else to do. When I looked again a few minutes later, he was gone. I texted my cousin asking about neighbors or anyone else who might have access to the property. He texted back about an hour later, saying the property was fully fenced and there was nobody else who should be out there. That made me feel considerably worse about what I had seen. I spent the evening inside with the curtains drawn, trying to convince myself it was a hiker who had strayed off a trail or someone who had not realized they were on private property. Rational explanations. I ran through all of them. None of them quite settled the feeling that had taken up residence in my stomach. Around 9 p.m., I was watching something on my laptop when I saw movement at the window. Just at the edge of my vision, a shape passing the gap in the curtains, gone by the time I looked directly at it. I heard footsteps in the grass outside moving quickly away from the cabin toward the back of the property. I called my cousin immediately. He told me to call the police, and I did. An officer came out about 40 minutes later. We walked the property perimeter with flashlights and found nothing. No sign of anyone. The officer said without more to go on, there was nothing he could do, and left me his card in case anything else happened. I locked every window and both doors before bed and checked them twice. Lay in the dark listening to the sounds of the property for a long time before I finally fell asleep. I woke up at just before 4 a.m. to a sound at the far end of the cabin. A soft impact against the exterior wall, followed by the quiet sound of a window being worked slowly in its frame. I lay completely still in the dark bedroom listening. The sound stopped, then started again. More deliberate this time. Then there was a soft click, and I heard the window give. Someone was coming in through the window at the far end of the cabin. I grabbed my phone and my keys from the nightstand and moved to the bedroom window. It opened outward onto the side of the cabin. I pushed it open as quietly as I could and climbed out into the grass and moved to my car without running. Got in, locked the doors, started the engine, and drove off the property. I was halfway to the main road when I saw my phone light up with a text from my cousin. He had gotten an alert from a trail camera he had mounted at the edge of his property that I had not known about. It had triggered at 11:47 p.m. The photo showed a man standing at the edge of the tree line, staring at the cabin. He had been out there since before midnight, 4.5 hours before he came through the window. Police went back in the morning and found where he had entered. The window latch had been forced. They also found where he had been standing in the trees during the night. The ground was worn down in a specific spot, not from one visit, from many. My cousin had not used the cabin in over 2 months. Whoever this person was had been coming to that property regularly long before I arrived. Long before my cousin had any reason to check the trail camera. I do not know what he was waiting for. I just know that when something finally arrived worth waiting for, he was patient enough to watch it for most of a night before he made his move. That is the part I cannot stop thinking about.